Okay, are we starting the meeting at 2:06?
2:06. So let me remind everybody, this is Peter Mason. This is a public hearing, and as such, when you are speaking, please introduce yourself to start. There is no public comment section to this, so if there's somebody from the public, they can listen, but there are there's no opportunity to provide input. We do have a ARPA email address, which we have on our website, that if you have questions and stuff, you can go there and they'll be answered in a timely manner. And these sessions are recorded, so just so that you know. Okay. Everybody received last month's minutes. Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, edits, changes, whatever?
I can bring them up if we need to.
If not, can I have a motion to accept?
I motion.
Thank you. Anybody second it?
Yes, I second it.
Great.
Is that Lori?
Yes, it's Lori.
Okay, all those in favor, either say aye, raise your hand if you're on camera. So
Aye. Aye. Aye.
those that are not, anybody is not in favor of them, or anybody want to abstain? Okay, they're passed.
Perfect.
I think when you said approval of last month, this is Peter, approval of last month's agenda, you meant minutes, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. This is Pam Fields. Yep.
Okay, then we will move on to Deloitte and an update on the transition plan. Betsy, you want to introduce yourself and take it away?
Hi, this is Betsy Bella with Deloitte. I've talked with this group before, and we're going to have our update really focusing on some of the input sessions we've been holding recently. We provided you an update last month on the plans for the sessions, and now we have can share we completed our final one today. So I'm going to turn the floor over to my colleague Julia Oak.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Oak from Deloitte. And as Betsy mentioned, I'll kind of share a little bit of overview and summary of some of the feedback that we heard during our input sessions. We've held 6 sessions with various stakeholders in the past 2 weeks. A session with providers for day and residential services, individuals and families, day and residential services, DDS staff and case managers, and then the DDS self-advocate coordinator group. So given that this group, I'm going to focus on some of the things that we heard in the residential focus sessions. So that would be with providers and individuals and families. And since I know it's been a while after the holidays, just to recap sort of the objective of these sessions, again, we're tying up on our end sort of the information gathering phase. So we've been doing research for a current state review to kind of get a sense for the landscape, both in Connecticut and in a couple other states. And then we're using the findings from these stakeholder input sessions to pressure test some of the ideas we found, and also kind of get feedback on potential design elements for moving on in phase 2. So I think sort of what we heard the past couple of weeks, a lot of it sort of validated what we've heard from this group and DDS, as well as through some of our research. I think a lot of the conversations, specifically for the residential sessions, focused on challenges, sort of the impacts with the workforce crisis and staffing, and sort of how that can impact an agency's ability to transition, but also from the individuals and families, sort of what that might mean for their loved one. So that was a big theme. I think another big piece was staff training. I think especially going into the residential, thinking about residential transitions, making sure that staff are on the same page, know kind of what they need to do and are coordinating closely with families and individuals. And then another big piece that came across every single session was the importance of individualization. So everyone's needs are different. People's needs might change over time, and being able to have, a flexible structure to make sure that, in moving on, people's needs are able to be met and their health and safety and preferences are all as needed for that specific person. So those were the sort of big themes that came across the provider and individual sessions. In the provider residential session, there was some discussion that highlighted supportive housing models and the social benefits that can come with being in a setting where you can see your friends and you're not, in your apartment by yourself. So that was a piece that was highlighted by the group, and we've also gathered some additional research on our end. And the other piece from the provider session that we want to highlight is in terms of remote supports. I think a lot of folks were excited about the potential and what that could bring. But I think thinking through what's sort of the backup plan if something happens with the technology, training staff and implementing, so kind of get all those pieces to be able to really get the full benefit from using remote supports and making sure that can work well for the individuals that it's working to support. In terms of some specific highlights from the individual or the provider session, similar sort of main themes. I think another piece that was interesting is an idea of a statewide IT support person to help with if an agency is thinking about remote supports, wants to know what's out there and available, and troubleshooting challenges and things. So that was sort of one idea that also came up. And then sort of also comments around challenges, transportation and different areas of the state, and then that might impact residential transitions was sort of another big piece. So it was a lot of information. I'll pause there. Any questions, anything you all would like to hear more about in terms of things that we heard the past couple of weeks?
Laurie?
Yes, hi, this is Lori Coughlin. I have a couple of questions in regards to the families of consumers who are in CRSs and CLAs. I've received, as a parent, a couple of phone calls of families that are concerned. I know the focus is on moving some individuals out into a more independent setting, but then there's the individuals that do need 24/7. And I guess we're looking at family preferences. If, for instance, there's a family who is in a CRS, their loved one, that being possibly closed or consolidated with another. And I just wanted to know how that's being addressed on an individual basis.
This is Peter Mason. So as this is all new to all of us, we're going to be working through a variety of plans. And I'm sure there's going to be there'll be some issues that will arise with individuals who don't want to leave a home. And I think, we're going to try to handle those on an individual basis. I think it's also going to be depending on what the plan is. And so what we've seen on a macro level is as individuals, as an opening happens in a group home, the people who are being referred to those openings have much more significant behavioral and medical needs. So the, the possibility of a house and the makeup of that house being disrupted is there as we speak now. And we also know we have a variety of a number of vacancies in the homes at this point. Some of that tracks all the way back, or not all the way back, but to the pandemic, where we had a number of individuals who passed away. And so there's a lot of capacity that's out there. So what we're expecting may happen is that there's going to be some consolidations of homes. And one of the things that we're looking at also are the CRSs. And the CRSs are were originally set up to accommodate more unique circumstances. It was more designed for families who wanted to establish a place for individuals to live, and they were going to work with the provider and come up with that. What we found is that that quickly took a different kind of turn and became an easier mechanism to open up than a regular group home, just because of the ease to do it was a lot easier. And so those CRSs actually, when the makeup of those CRSs are actually probably have a higher lawn than the regular CLAs do, only because a lot of them were emergencies. They need to get them up and running, and they should have gone into a group home, but they went into a CRS. So the funding for that, especially like the room and board piece, is much more difficult for individuals than if it is under room and board. So, and I tell you that because some of these things, some of what we may see is some of these consolidations where we may see a number of the CRSs be closed and individuals move into vacancies into the CLAs, and other individuals would go to independent sending. So we kind of see all this stuff. So, and the point is that there's going to be a lot of reasons out there as to what's going to happen with the home. And I think a lot of them will kind of make sense, and I don't think there'll be a lot of issues, but there'll be some where there may be an individual or two who are adamant that they don't want to leave their house, and yet there's nobody else left in that house except for them, and the provider wants to close. I think in that circumstances, that's where we all need to work together to figure out how to structure something that's going to be amicable to everybody. So I think that's the best I can do. It's going to be all over the place. And, you know, the idea isn't to throw people out and put them into, you know, their own setting and they don't want to go. That's not the idea. But there will be some consolidations that will make some of those moves. And we'll just have to figure out how to work through those on a team basis.
But Peter, the smaller settings do work for some of the consumers. The smaller CRS settings of 3 individuals versus 5 or 6 in a home.
Yep.
I mean, I've seen the benefits of that firsthand. You know, it's difficult sometimes to put 5 or 6 girls together in a home.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
no, and I get that, and that's not. I didn't say we're closing every CRSs. I'm just saying that there's going to be some consolidations, and there's the feedback we have is that individuals who are in a CRS don't have the same resources themselves than somebody who's in a CLA that get room and board rate. And so, you know, we look at that's going to be one of the consideration, you know, would the individual have more opportunities if they were at a CLA versus in a CRS because of the financial piece of it. The supervision may override that. I can't give you a blanket, it's going to be one way or the other, because we deal with so many different individuals. We just have to figure out how to do this as a team and work through the issues as best we can for each individual.
Okay, thank you.
I think Heather had her name up. Heather, is your hand up there next?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, what you're finding from the input sessions is basically what we've talked about already. Individualization is important. And then what Lori brought up is exactly what we're dealing with and why it's hard to put in a transition plan right now. I have a home where there's 2 ladies that eventually will live on their own. I know they will, but they're not ready yet, and their families aren't ready yet. And so as we have openings in that home, we're moving in people with heavy behavioral support needs. And so far they're a family. It's great, but I think with more exposure to other people that live in IHS settings and stuff, they're eventually it's going to be their idea to move out. But putting that on a timeline and waiting for an award to happen once they move out, or it's just, that's hard for us who's been living in basically individual choice and timing with teams. So I think that's really what we're hearing, is that people might be ready to move out one day, and we might find the perfect setting, but it's not all going to happen at once, and that there's no incentive to move people in with more and more behavioral needs to a CLA, or from hospitals to CLA. I mean, I say it every meeting. I know there's none, but I think there should be. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, that's, I think that the state's been pretty clear that we're not going to close all group homes. That's not the intent of this initiative. But we also want to be clear that the people moving into those group homes are going to have different behavioral and medical needs than the ones that were there 5-10 years ago. And so those changes are going to interrupt anybody who's in that house. And eventually the individual will adapt and will be good, will work well in that setting. But in the meantime, there could be some disruptions that will happen. And so, it's going to be one of those things that I think, as Heather said, eventually, whether that's going to be enough to say, okay, I don't want to be in this house anymore, I want something alternative, or not. I mean, that's going to happen. We're not looking at forcing anybody at this point. We have an opportunity now for those that want to do it, and this is the incentives to give it. As we go through and finish up with the ARPA period, I'm not too sure if those incentives will still be there. So whether the department keeps this going, which is what my hope is, which is what their hope is, but you never know with the budget as to whether that will continue. But things are changing, and I guess I'll give the best analogy I can give is Salisbury Training School, and that in the beginning people were adamant that they weren't going to move out of Salisbury. As we started moving people out on their own, they volunteered, and as people started to pass away, because Salisbury has an older population, it started getting to the point where you couldn't keep open certain cottages. And so you'd close the cottage and then people would have to learn to adjust to that new place. And then it would happen again. And then that individual could have moved like 3 or 4 times over a 3 or 4 time year, 3 or 4 times over 3 or 4 years because of the downsizing that's happened. That may be the similar thing that happens in the private sector as well. Because whether the state's going to put in a lot of money to keep all the group homes open, I'm not too sure if we'll have the money for that versus being able to support people in more community-based independent settings. So it's a changing population, it's a changing system. And so we're trying to help those that want to move now. And once again, we're not forcing anyone to do anything, but there may be consequences because at some point there's the law of diminishing returns. If you only have one person in the house, you may not be able to keep that house going, and so then they may have to consolidate. So I think that's the stuff that I think may happen, and then would have to work with the individuals and the teams as to how that would work. And that this may move that along, but I'm not saying this hasn't happened already, because we've had a number of group homes that have closed over the last couple of years already, because of just what I said. So things do happen. Mary Pat? You're on mute.
This is Mary Pat DiCarlo from the Kennedy Collective. I was wondering if you heard from families anything where they were just really going to dig their heels in and says, you're not going to make me, you're not going to, this isn't fair, that total objection. Were you hearing that from anyone?
This is Julia Oak from Deloitte. Not from anyone that was on the line. I think the sentiment was generally, this sounds like a wonderful program, but probably not for my child. But I think the concept of it, there's no one that was like, definitely not ever. A lot of them just said, I don't think that's for me, but it sounds like it might be nice for another individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the reason I ask is because we're right now in the process of trying to change, kind of repurpose one of our day programs, and we were going to be shifting some people around. And I was really surprised at the feedback from some of the families, like, no, it's their right. They want to be there, their stay. And it's like, So, if I see that for just 6 hours a day, of a day program, I can imagine what some of these folks are going to be like when I say, no, we're gonna be closing their group home and we gotta, look to move them somewhere else. Yeah, so, okay. I was just curious as to if anybody was totally against it.
This is Betsy Bell of Deloitte. I thank you, Mary Pat. That's such an important point. And I'd just like to reiterate in our messaging to the families and in the state's messaging that's gone out around the Moving On program, and even the requirements in the transition plan templates that providers are completing, it really emphasizes that need to, right, those conversations that you're having right now with families around the changes. And so I think some people are finding, obviously there's apprehension out there, but some comfort in that idea, right? And so people were maybe not hearing the pushback, but I think it's an important point that the providers might be hearing the pushback from families, and we'll have to work with EDS to see how we can help support through those sorts of obstacles.
This is Mary Pat again. I wonder if we'll see that kickback at all in the survey, right? It would be interesting to see, what that feedback is that, comes back through the survey in regards to that. So, okay.
Peter?
Hi, this is Peter from ARC Incorporated, and pardon me, I came in a little bit late, so you may have already covered this, but when do you hope to have all the survey results back and compiled?
This is Julia Oak from Deloitte. So we are kind of getting at the surveys in 2 lanes. We're coordinating with a contractor that has sent out a paper survey to individuals and families. They'll be receiving their full results. They're expecting to have those ready in early February. So for individuals and families and staff, DDS staff. And then our team from Deloitte is doing a survey to providers. And we'll have a quicker turnaround for that, but reasonably in early February as well. And the full report will come shortly after. We'll summarize sort of everything from the survey and the input sessions.
This is Mary Pat again. When do you think the providers are going to see a survey if you want results back by early February?
So we're I think Peter's reviewing it. So as soon as we get approval from Peter's team, that'll go out through Everbridge.
This is Peter. I just sent it to you before the meeting.
Amazing. Julia from Deloitte. So very soon, Mary Pat.
Okay.
This is Peter Mason. You know, I can't emphasize enough that, you know, we're not forcing people. And I know there's going to be a lot of resistance, and no one said this was going to be easy. It wasn't easy when we closed institutions either. I mean, we had people fighting that as well. We still have people fighting closing Southbury. You know, and at this point, we haven't forced people out of Southbury. So I mean, I think the idea of us forcing people is not, that's not what this department is planning on doing. But there will be some ramifications of some of these moves, and we just need to figure out how to handle those changes that may happen to people's programming. You know, if a house does close, you know, how do we work through that, you know, with an individual who's still in that house, and how do we work through that to make sure that they get a placement that would be similar to what they've had. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the plans are. We haven't seen, we've only seen one plan, and that's getting revised. So I think as we start moving forward with this, I think, you know, if you look at it on a grand scale, the number of people in a group home, which I think is around 3,000 people, they have the bulk of DDS's money, and the majority goes to that. And when you have people who's on the waiting list looking for services, we need to figure out how to make sure that we're doing this as equitably as possible. Not to say that we're going to close group homes and stuff, but the people going into group homes is going to change dramatically. And so their expectations going to be a lot different than the expectations were 15 years ago, where the group home was the place to be. That expectation, I can see, will be changed in terms of only individuals who have really significant medical or behavioral needs will be looking at going into a group home, and everybody else we have to figure out how to support in an alternative setting. Anybody else have any questions so far? Okay, I'll go back to Deloitte. You guys have something next? Oh, hold on, Lori's back. Go ahead, Lori.
Hi, Peter, it's Lori Coughlin. One more question. On this first phase of proposals, do you have any idea how many agencies are going to be submitting proposals?
Yes, I don't know if you guys, Betsy, if you're going to delve into that. If not, I can go into that. So that's up to you.
No, that's what we were doing next.
Oh, okay. They're gonna talk about that next.
Thank you.
So we are still getting updates. The link for providers to say they're interested in participating in phase 1 is still open. And as of today, we have 25 providers across all 3 regions who have said that they are at least interested in information. Of those providers, there were 12 who confirmed, yes, we are planning to submit a plan by March 3rd. Now, that doesn't sound like a ton of providers, but we're just talking here about phase 1. So this is just providers who were really ready to, some of them are on this call, who are really ready to go for it, get started, are excited about the transition. And then we anticipate there will be many more providers in phase 2, which will launch this spring. Phase 2 is going to offer folks, you know, a little more direction, more guidance, right? As Julia said, the research, including these input sessions, has really been about designing what does the approach for phase 2 look like. And so a lot of providers are waiting to see, at least that's our hope, right? And gathering information, talking to the folks that they serve and their families to identify, okay, then what does phase 2 look like? So we really don't know how many will participate in phase 2. DDS has talked about how they would love to see every provider who operates a congregate setting submit a plan, even if it's just for a few transitions. However, it will not be mandatory. It's a voluntary opportunity. But as you all know, this sort of funding doesn't often come around in this world, but we have the ARPA opportunity at hand today. And so I'm really excited to hopefully be able to provide the sort of guidance, support, technical assistance, and training that makes people feel comfortable getting plans out and moving forward with some of these implementations to take advantage of these incentives.
And this is Peter Mason. I want to emphasize that when the majority of those that have said they have an interest are talking about 1 or 2 programs. They're not looking at their whole agency. I think we have one agency that is looking at their whole agency, but everybody else, it's like 1 or 2 programs, which is fine with us, because at that point it would be at a pace that we make sure that we're not doing this major transition in a short time period. You know, to start looking at individual programs, you know, some programs here, it could also be, you know, that a day program could be put in that they just want to downsize the number of people in a DSO from 25 to 20. It doesn't have to be the whole program itself. So, you know, we're trying to be as flexible to make sure that we're meeting for those individuals who want to have a more independent setting, that they have the opportunity to do that in a way that they will be able to maximize their community participation. I think Tammy was first and then Mary Pat.
So just because I know I'm going to be at DDS for many years to come, weird question. Are we incentivizing providers who, knowing that we need these CLAs for those individuals that are more behaviorally challenged or that are more medically fragile, what incentives are we doing for providers to increase their capacity in those arenas so we don't lose the service and end up, and the way I'm going to say this is not the way I really mean it, but to only be able to service those that are pretty independent and pretty high functioning. Are we thinking ahead on how to make sure providers have the capacity and the ability to support those that do have significant behavioral challenges or those that do have intense medical needs?
So this is Peter Mason, and this is where this gets a little tricky. And not so much in terms of how it gets done, but not in terms of the actual way of it getting done, but how it gets done. And so if a provider is looking at restructuring a group home. So they have individuals now that they believe some of them may be able to move into an independent setting. Some of them may be able to move to a CCH. Some of them may be able to move within their agency to a vacancy to create that home to be restructured for medical and behavioral. The ARPA initiative is to fund individuals who are moving into less congregate settings. But what we're trying to do is to be able to work with that agency to determine what their support needs are. What do they need to help restructure those homes, which we would have to do within DDS in terms of one-times, in terms of alternate rates, and we're willing to do that, but it has to be, it's not part of the ARPA initiative. That's not what this was about. This was for more community-based. So it's the first, as people move out, we then, DDS will need to provide the supports to restructure those homes within its existing funding mechanisms. And DDS is willing to do that. But we need to see what those plans are and what people are trying to do and what are their needs. So if you look at the budget that we set up, it will show, you know, what are you trying to do? What are the gaps that you have? And what are the resources you would need? And so that we can have a conversation with the provider in terms of, okay, so as we move individuals to I'll just use a supportive housing setting, and this opens up this group home, I may need a behaviorist, I may need XYZ. DDS and the regions will need to start working, okay, how do we then help to transform that to allow the provider to do that in order so that they would be able to provide supports to individuals who are on our emergency list, which is what we would be talking about.
I think this is Tammy from DDS. Again, I think I'm just concerned that that's not the messaging. The messaging is closing down group homes, moving the people around that are currently there. It's not repurposing the current CLAs for those, and, you know, what are providers going to need? I think the transformation is really being marketed to the individuals who can, and they should, you know, move out, live more independently, live in a CCH and all of that. I don't think the marketing includes how can you use what are you now going to use your group home for? And what supports do you need there? So I'm just worried about the marketing of it. And just because I'm on the kid end and I see we have no place to put age outs that have behavioral needs, and we don't have any place to put age outs that have medical needs. If our focus is on continuing to give support to the people already getting support, we have nothing for the people who are coming up that need to move out of children's homes, need to move out of residential schools, that need to move out of there. So I just want to make sure we're marketing the back end piece to providers as well, not just the front end of how you're going to do your transformation, but what are you going to do with those old other resources that you already had in terms of homes, and what do you need there? So I think that's just my concern, just right now, I know how many age outs that are on our list right now that we have no place to put them.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you read the transition guidelines, it does go into about that that piece of it. This initiative isn't designed to have a provider consolidate 4 homes into 3 homes. There's no incentive for that to happen. Because that's moving people still into congregate settings. So there has to be some kind of settings change that happens. So we're looking at that, but I think the incentives, and I think that's probably why the marketing is such, because the incentives are for individuals moving out of the group home. But I've been pretty consistent that if those moves are being made to restructure those houses for individuals who have more significant medical or behavioral needs, that is what we'll be looking at. And then we need to figure out how to support the provider in order that they will have the resources to support individuals that would be going into that. What we can't support is just opening up a vacancy and then having an individual come off the wait list who may not need to be in a group home. We can't do that. So we have to make sure that we're doing it in such a way that we're incentivizing people that want to move into a community. We're incentivizing that, and then incentivizing that if there is going to be a backfill into that opening, that it's for somebody who needs significant medical or behavioral needs who are on our waiting list.
This is Mary Pat DiCarlo from the Kennedy Collective. A couple of points. One, unfortunately, Peter, I think there is an unintended incentive to close group homes right now, because the incentive is that that's less staff I have to hire. I'm down so many staffing positions right now. If I close one group home, I can reassign those staff to other group homes and, ease that burden. So there is that unintentional incentive to close homes. And then if the money incentive is on the fact of, okay, take in those who have more significant needs, right now is not the time to say you're going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm closing, say, a smaller home, and I'm putting those people in the openings that I have, and that small, 3-bed home, had one staff on during the day, maybe 1.5 on second shift and 1 on overnight, but I'm going to move 3 highly behavioral people into another home where I'm going to need 3 times the staff. Not the time to do that.
Timing in this is Peter Mason. The timing in this is not great at all.
Right.
We can't, we didn't set the timing on this. We're following along with what the ARPA guidelines are and their deadlines. I mean, there's the staffing itself. We've already heard, providers don't want to do this because they just don't have the staff who can even do the actual restructuring. I get it.
Yeah.
And your point about the backfilling and closing a group home. And I think I understand that too. I mean, that's going to be some providers. And I guess I look at, this is where it's such a struggle out there, and I get it. And at the same time, I got to make sure that if you have 4 homes and you want to close one so you can make sure that there's adequate staffing for the other 3, I get that. I mean, that makes sense too, and that's better for the individuals in the 3 homes that are going to be there. So yeah, this isn't great timing. And if we waited till the perfect time, I probably won't be alive.
and no, and I understand that. I mean, and I'm not saying, it's his fault. We just need to keep that in our minds that, yes, to Tammy's point, what are the incentives? Well, right now, unfortunately, we have this unintended incentive to go the other way and just say, no, I'm just going to close up a couple. I'm getting out of the business, that kind of thing. So just want to put that on the table. The other question I had was, has there been any more talk about this incentives around any of the ICF homes?
So no, there hasn't been any talk.
Okay.
once again, the ICFs are under DSS's funding, not DDS's funding, so our initiative is for those that DDS funds. I know that there is talk about the ICFs and what the strategy should be going forward. I don't know where those talks are. I'm not in those discussions, but I know there are talks. You know, I think the other thing that I think what we've done as a system is everybody tries to do everything. So every provider tries to hit all the different support needs for everybody. And I don't know if that's necessarily the great thing for all providers. I mean, some agencies may be better concentrating on people who have medical or behavioral, and some may be better concentrating on individuals in a supportive housing. I think we may start seeing some of that as well. You know, it's the staffing is such that you know, there are going to be some consequences because of that staffing. If you can't find enough staff, you know, God forbid it doesn't go into the way that you can't provide the staff supports that something happens to the individual. I mean, that's what we all will try to avoid. We're doing what we can. You know, we're giving providers money for employment incentives and stuff to try to increase that stuff. So we're doing what we can. If there's not enough staff out there, you know, then I've always said we need to learn how we maximize the staff we have. And, you know, when you have a group home, there's set schedules there that it may be difficult for everybody to keep supporting there. So I can see that there may be consequences of some of these closures. I would hope not. I would hope that some of them would look to restructure. But I get what you're saying, Mary Pat. I do.
Okay.
Betsy Bella from Deloitte. Other questions or comments? Well, these are all important conversations to have. It's also good to hear from the group that you felt that your own concerns were echoed in the input sessions. But that's also part of why the input sessions, of course, unfortunately, none of you could attend for how we had them invited and structured. So we are going to be releasing in spring a updated transition plan template providers can use for the planning process, so that, you know, a recurring conversation theme of this conversation today, right, is this importance of taking it on a case-by-case basis and close coordination between providers and regional offices and providers and the people they serve, so that each transition plan can make sense for the most folks in an area and minimize unintended consequences, both for the immediate term and long term. And so alongside with those transition plan templates, there will be trainings for DDS staff and providers. There will be communications out to everyone, including individuals and families. Right, we want to make sure, you know, I think we're hearing some of these themes around how are things being marketed, how are people understanding, and making sure that there's clear, consistent messaging of DDS's vision and purposes that are being shared across the board. And so you don't run into situations like case managers getting questions from people and not having answers. So we're right at that cusp of going from information gathering into making sure everything is in good stead for that second phase, while phase one continues of plan submission. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Julia. Oh, Mary Pat. Oh. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Okay, so
Updates on DDS progress. Sorry, I said it, but I was muted.
Um, so as Betsy said, there's 23 agencies, well, it's 25 now. And we're sending out communications to all 25. Deloitte will be asking for if they need any other assistance and stuff, and what we can do to help them move forward. Just so that you have a breakdown. This is based on the 23. I don't have the other two right now. In terms of the number of providers that have put in for the plan, in the north, there's 9 providers that put in. 7. There's 7 7 of those 9 have said that they are planning to submit a plan. 6 are for residential changes and 1 is for day change. We also have 2 that would do both day and res. For the south, we have 11 providers, and 4 said that they would be submitting a plan. In the south, that would be 5 in residential, 3 in day, and then 3 would have both day and residential changes. And the west has 3. So as I said, north is 9, the south is 11. The west is a little behind. They have 3 providers, with only 1 planning to submit a plan. And that plan would include residential and day and residential changes together. So one of the things that did come up in terms of the stakeholder session is that it's, whether people understand all the funding that is out there. And so I've started this draft of how to present the different fundings that's out there. And what we'll do is have our communications consultant and Deloitte look at this to see if they can make it a little bit more functional. But I do want to show what I'm thinking this would look like. So let me see if I can get to. Let's see. So Betsy will be seeing this for the first time. So let's see, let's share this. And so let me know if you can see this. Everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
what we've been concentrating on in terms of the moving on transition funding opportunities has been the incentives that have been down below. And so for residential, we have an outcome payment for somebody who does transition to a non-congregate setting from a congregate setting. We have doubled the service rate for the individual who's moving into the non-congregate setting to help with the increased staffing or other costs associated with the transition. And then we also will be paying the provider for any vacancies that are created because the individual transitioned out until that position is restructured, or that house is restructured, or until everybody moves out. So, those are the 3 things we have for residential. For day, we have double the service rate for moving to a non-congregate day setting, and for any increased staffing or costs associated with the transition. And then we also will be payment for an open vacancy due to an individual transitioning out. So this is what we've kind of concentrated on, is these incentives. But we need to look at the bigger picture, and some of this came out at in the stakeholder sessions. Well, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. So other things that have happened that are in conjunction with the moving on transition. The rates, the revised rates that came out just about at the beginning of the fiscal year, they were raised to make sure that there was money there for the minimum wage. But then there were other rates, those for the individualized supports, that were raised above the minimum wage amount in order to incentivize those individualized supports, knowing that they'll need additional funding as they're more individualized. So we raised the rates accordingly. We've been funding providers for infrastructure technology funds to help develop systems to help reduce the providers' administrative burdens. And, you know, as people are looking at this and then they're talking about, well, yeah, if we're going to move more people into an individualized supports, there's going to be more billing pieces to this. So, but we have this infrastructure funding, and we're hoping that the providers can try to look at that together and say, all right, so if I know I'm going to get more people who are in IHS that are going to need this kind of funding, here's the infrastructure technology funding that we also have available that providers could help look at how do they restructure their some of their administrative systems to help offset that. We also have the workforce stability funding to assist with maintaining and increasing providers' workforce. You know, we've been giving that money out, and I get it. You know, there's very little workers at this point. And, you know, it's not that I want to wish on a recession so that we have more staffing, because that will actually turn things around. But, you know, we've provided additional funding in order to, at the very least, to help maintain their workforce. Our hope was that it would increase the funding and, I mean, increase their workforce. But, you know, from what I hear, that's not working out as well as we would have liked. And in addition, we heard, you know, well, now there's going to be more assistive technology that's needed, and, you know, that's not part of the incentives. Well, it isn't part of the incentives, but we issued incentive assistive technology grants opportunities. We just let those out, I think, last week or the week before. And that's to fund assessments, equipment installation, maintenance cost, and training to increase independence or for individuals moving to more independent day or residential settings. So that's another pot that people can tap into to help assist with these moves. And in addition, we also have supportive housing grants that we're looking at issuing out hopefully over the next month. And we're looking at for non-project based settings. And what we've done to date has been from the ground up. So they've been new settings to start, and that those take 2 to 3 years to develop. We're looking at how do we then able to work with existing housing complexes to be able to work with those developers so that we can increase the number of affordable and supervised housing in a more quickly manner. So, you know, as I said, we try to tend towards the incentive piece because that's what we've talked about. But if you look at the broader thing, there's a number of different pots that a provider should be tapping into in order to help assist with transitioning people out. So you guys get to see this as the first time it's been out there. So if you have any comments or suggestions, I'd take that. And I'll pass that on to Deloitte and our communications consultant. But I wanted to try to give a better feel of all the different pieces that we have that's available. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that.
I do, Peter. This is Pam Fields from Midstate. I'll lower my hand. You don't hear from me a lot because I'm busy taking minutes and I have trouble talking and minute taking at the same time. But on the chart where you mentioned the AT grants, and that's, you know, it's so exciting with those. There's also, you might want to include those AT grants for the CLAs and CRSs, and those fundings help you know, maybe give people in there the independence and start to teach them some of the skills they need, but it also gives resources for staff. So it helps that staff shortage inside the house when you're putting assistive technology in the homes.
Good, thanks. I will add that to it. Thank you.
Hmm.
Anybody else have any questions regarding that? All right. So now we're going to be starting to move towards phase 2. While providers are going to be submitting plans that are based on phase 1, as Deloitte said, we've looked at other states. We've had 5 other states we've looked at. We've done individual and family surveys. We had 350 were submitted as of Tuesday. One of the things that we heard was that we had that the individuals may not have seen that. And that may be true, unfortunately, because after talking to our legal department, we needed to send that out to the legally responsible person. As such, it was up to them, and we tried to encourage them to work with the individual to fill out the survey. But they were the ones that would have received the survey. We did send out somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,300 to 1,500 surveys to the individuals themselves who are their own legal guardian. So it's a good share of the amount. We sent out a total of 9,200 surveys. They went only to individuals who were in a congregate setting, that we were looking for their feedback in the actual congregate setting. So, but of that 9,200, 13 to 1,500 went to the individual themselves because they're their own legal guardian. We sent a copy of the survey to the case managers. And just yesterday, after hounding and all that stuff, I finally got the providers were sent a copy of the survey. So the providers should have seen that. So can I ask if you guys did get a copy of the survey at this point? Yes. Thank you. As Deloitte talked about the input sessions, and there are the themes, you know, the workforce crisis was a big theme. There was also the theme of training of case managers to make sure that they are in the loop, are supportive and understanding and know what what this is all about. We're trying to work on that piece of it. We know that when phase 2 starts, there'll be a specific training for case managers. We're trying to figure out how to do that because we have a large number of case managers, and we're going between whether to do a large training or do we train the case manager supervisors who then would train the case managers. So we are working that. We're trying to work through that so that when we get to that point, we'll have a way of how to train the case managers. And communication is just, you know, we're trying to get this out, and it's not a simple process when you're talking a large agency like ours is. There's a lot of chiefs and trying to get everybody to follow through and communicate this. We're trying to work through so that we have a system. We do have a communication consultant that's assisting us in terms of how to get this out. We're looking at establishing a newsletter to be sent out on a regular basis, whether that's a monthly or a bi-monthly basis, to individuals and to providers and DDS staff. It's not an easy feat because we have a gap in terms of our email system for families, trying to get the families, everybody to share their emails. And even if we do that, then trying to keep up with the changes to emails And we haven't come up with a good method of doing that. And so when we do these quarterly or, monthly or bi-monthly newsletters, we're going to have to mail it out to everybody, which is very expensive. But we need to make sure that we get the information out to people. So, and then we have to do it in the language that is appropriate. We have, I think we work somewhere with 13 or 14 different languages, but the bulk of it is English and Spanish. So we will be making sure our communication is in both English and Spanish. The other thing is that came through one of the themes is to clearly articulate what the menu of options, support options are. I don't think we've done a good job on that. And so one of the things that we need to look at is how do we put that menu of options so that everybody knows all the different pieces to it. And so that's on our list to look at as well. One of the things that we are looking at doing is establishing a series of videos regarding the different support types. We want to make sure that these are based on actual settings. So we're looking for individuals that may live in a supportive housing setting, use assistive technology, utilize remote supports, live in a CCH, have gone through customized employment. So we're working through that. We're looking at a real tight timeline to see if we can get half of those done by the end of March, and then we'll be able to disseminate them and have them on our website so people can actually see what it looks like instead of this theoretical that we talk about. Anybody have any questions on that? Mary Pat, your hand's up again. Is that still the same hand from before?
You know me. No. In regards to getting the information out and, again, not having updated emails and this and that, we struggle with the same thing all the time, trying to get information out to the families. What about putting more of this on the DDS website? So it would be, real easy for case managers to say, go on the DDS website. There's some great information, it could have the video links right there, because right now, if you want this information, you need to know to look for the ARPA, and we're not advertising this as necessarily as ARPA, right? It's the moving on. So why not, a big flashy section of the website where this information, and then the links can lead you to other places that you want to go.
And it's definitely something we're looking at. Unfortunately, we're also kind of stuck within the guidelines of the state website designs, which isn't necessarily the most creative. And before we were able to set up our own websites and we could do that. Now we have to follow this certain guideline, and that kind of how many links you can have to here and there. And it's kind of crimped us in terms of what we can do. But we're trying to see how to do this, but nothing is ever simple. So, Pam?
Yeah, what about having, working with the communication people to blast it over the social media? That's the new way of people getting information. You guys have a DDS website. Most of us have agency websites that we could share the information on. So if the families aren't on yours or on ours, or the ARCs or the different ones. So that might be another way.
We have been putting stuff through our website. I mean, our different social media pieces. It's whether we've advertised enough of the social media pieces that I don't know. So, but I know we have utilized it. I just don't know if we've utilized it as best we can. So it's one of the things that our communication consultant will be reviewing as well. Anybody else have any questions on that? I got one more thing to talk about. Okay, so the last piece is, and Mary Pat kind of alluded to it. So the moving on transition piece is one part of our American Relief Fund money. So that's why we're not calling this the ARPA initiative. It's just one piece of it. So we've gone through in the past different things that we have looked at. And one of them is a website for individuals who self-determine their resources and hire their own staff. So we have contracted with a company called Rewarding Work, and they're redesigning our website so that individuals who are looking for staff and staff who are looking for work would be able to upload their resume, upload their applications or request, and this will then be able to match to allow them to interview each other. So that redesign of that website looks to be at this point on track to be available on March 1st. We are working with DSS on a grander scale to because they're going to include their individuals on the next one. That's still in the development phase, but we've got ours up and running for the people that funded by DDS. I did mention about the AT grants that we posted. We're also looking at establishing a new AT grant opportunity for day programs. What we found that we had a hole in terms of a gap between what we were issuing and getting requests from some day providers who are saying, well, we want to try AT assistive technology at the work sites. So these grants, this opportunity should be issued soon to allow more to allow day programs to purchase assistive technology as well. And we have the non-project supportive housing grant looks to be, that should be posted hopefully within the month, so we can see how that works out. And that is the update from my end.
Awesome. And the only thing left is there any other issues or concerns?
So, I really think we need to, for this committee, we really need to figure out what areas that we want to work through in terms of assisting with the transition. So one of the areas that we brought this question to the our overall advisory committee, and one of the things that they talked about was shared living and homes purchased by parents and how that would work. And so I just want to see if, if there's issues out there that we should be addressing to assist for the overall structure in this. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of the transition. It could be another alternative to it, but I want to be able to utilize this committee that would work for the system. So and maybe we can have like a broader conversation next meeting to see what we can do to work on that would help for the broader system. And Laurie.
Hi, Peter. This is Lori Coughlin. Yes, I'm working with some families that are in the process of trying to pull blended funding resources together. They also are looking at purchasing houses, and that would be a great topic for the the next meeting and how we can better assist these families with some guidelines?
Yeah, I think it's something that is more complicated than people think it is. It's not easy. And, you know, we have to make sure that there's an issue that comes out. If the parents own the house, then all of a sudden it's a related party. And at that point, it then has different guidelines than if it's a private ownership. So there are definitely some different complications to it. And so one of the things we can do is we have a related party homes guideline, and I can probably we can go over that just so people have a broad idea of what that would look like. We've seen it all. We've seen them work really well, and we've seen it start off well, and 3 families get together, and all of a sudden one of the families, it becomes on the outs of the group, and now they want to kick that person out, and then they want DDS to fill the slot, and it becomes not an easy thing to do, because then you're in the middle of, well, this parent was here. So I mean, there are different pieces to this that come into play. We had one where we had a family who bought a house across the street from them, and were providing the supports to their individual. And because they owned the house, they could only charge the actual cost. And I'll go through those guidelines when we do that. So whatever it cost them is what they would get reimbursed in terms of rent from the individual. And their complaint was, yeah, but the guy who's 2 houses down can rent his house for $2,000 more. So I want to be able to rent it at this. It's like, no, this isn't designed to make a profit. This is designed, if you're going to move that, this is what it's going to be. And because if there's state fund is going in there, and in that case, it would be rent subsidy.
Right.
It has to follow the related party guidelines. And so, you know, the complications are not it's not as simple as it sounds. So not that I'm trying to discourage it, people just need to know the variety of issues that come about.
Okay. No, it's very complicated. It is really complicated, and I'm really don't know how to handle the situation with some families, because it's tricky. You know, it almost makes more sense to pull them together in an apartment, you know, as sort of a stage one, and not think in terms of purchasing something until the relationships are established and the staffing is established, and then at some point down the road. But, you know, parents tend to think that they're buying a home and this is in their child's best interest, and not really knowing all the possible scenarios that could come up.
Right.
So yeah, it's very tricky.
Well,
So that was great.
And in the system, the home is the least expensive part of that.
Absolutely.
And when we've been in the middle of, you know, they had the perfect scenario, everything worked out, and all of a sudden staff left here, staff left there, and then they wanted DDS to bail them out and pay for all the staff. I was like,
Yep.
yeah, no, you know, all of a sudden the individual is going to get more than it would be in a regular group home. And, you know, we got to look at equity in this too. And, you know, I fight sometimes in terms of individuals, families who want to purchase a home down on the Gold Coast because they have the resources, and then they want DDS to assist them. And then you have individuals in Hartford who are barely making ends meet and barely able to feed themselves in an apartment. And you sit there going, wait a second, we can't. Medicaid was not designed to fund everybody. It was more for those individuals who could not afford this stuff. So we have to be careful on what we establish is equal and transparent and is open to everybody. So we got to watch how all these things get set up.
Yes, I agree. Yes, thank you.
So we can bring that up next week. So that'd be great. Next time we meet.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? And this is Peter Mason. All those times I didn't say that was my name. I'm the worst one with this thing. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, if not, thank you, everybody. And we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.